All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Handmade Hero. Today we are probably just going to do some experiments with collision. We need to basically we have we need to we did all weird stuff with the glove, like you can see here, a strange test case we made where you can put in patterns for the glove that have like different speeds depending on where they go. Um, And that, like, we don't really know if this is something we're actually going to use, but we were just playing around with like move cues and how they might work. Um, this stuff's a little bit janky, but we only just sort of started playing around with it. And furthermore, we don't have a few things in there that we need to have in there. Like, for example, when you do one of these crazy glove patterns, the amount of time it takes the glove to return to you is always the same right now. And I would assume that while we may want something weird like that because you want it to feel a certain way, um, as we start to actually tune the motion of things like the glove, I'm assuming we would want the return time to be at least somewhat proportional to how far away you are, so that the glove takes longer to return if it's further away. Maybe we don't, but I assume we do. So what I wanted to do today was make it so that we figure out how we want, or at least get some semblance of a plan for how we want to do like the collision. So, we've got this situation here, and we'd like to start making it so you can eliminate enemies when you hit an enemy. We would like it to do like a point of damage or apply whatever random effects we want. And because we want this to feel like tile-based, basically, like we want it to feel like it's happening on the grid, we need to figure out what we want our definition of hit to be. It probably still just wants to be when the boxes of the two things touch. But I don't know, like, it's hard to say. So, we can do it in a lot of different ways, but I don't know which way we actually want to do. We could make it so that it's when the glove arrives at the square is actually the just the punch. That's when it does the damage. So whenever it arrives at the square is when it does the damage. We could also do when the two bounding boxes overlap is when it does the damage, and I don't really know. I guess we'll just start with the when the glove arrives at the square is when it does damage. So if somebody's leaving a square and the glove arrives at that square, it does not count. I guess, I don't know. I'm really not sure how we want to do it. I suspect we don't. There's just so many ways you could do this, and I really don't know what you want. So I think we just have to try them and see what feels good, because I just have no idea. Like, for example, let's suppose that you have somebody who's hopping from one square to the next square. In that scenario, when they're hopping from one square to another, and maybe I'll turn this dude into like a thing that hops from one square to another, for example, just so we can play around with it. If you hop from one square to the next square, then when are you considered in this square if the rule is that the glove arrives at the square, it does the damage? You know what I mean? I just don't know. I don't know. And I feel like that's something that should have a smart answer to it, but I don't know what it is because I don't do game design. So my guess is that we probably want something like there's the halfway transition point when you are considered in the square, and at the halfway transition point, like, that's when like something like at the halfway transition point, that's when you become in that square, and on the halfway exit point, So like at 0.5 on enter and 0.5 on exit kind of a thing. You know what I mean? So we could do it that way. I think that's just, yeah, I think that's probably going to be not what we want long term. I think maybe just if the bounding boxes overlap is what we're going to probably want. I'm guessing. So like you just look at when the old school collision, like if the two bounding boxes happen to overlap, then that's a strike. Probably. And the reason I say that is just because that's what the player sees visually, right? So it should match what the player sees visually because that's what they are going to be most able to time. If they have to time something that's not really like that, like if they have to time something that's more more like abstract, like what square you're in like that, then I feel like it's just going to feel less satisfying. So I think we just kind of want the old school version of that, where we basically say, look, check for collision against some things in the nearby area, and if anything overlaps, that's just what happens. So it would be very akin to something like a Street Fighter, right? So we define like a hitbox, and we just say that if hitboxes overlap, then that's when it's a strike, right? I think that's basically it. So let's just do that, and we'll call it a day. I don't know why we have a ray intersects box call. Does anyone know what that is here for? It is here for hit testing. Okay, so it's literally just for debug. We probably should have labeled that debug. It looks like it's strictly for like picking entities with the mouse, right? Because I was like, what the heck? We don't use that anywhere. So I was a little weirded out about why it was there. Anyway, doesn't matter. Point being, entities basically all move, and they can all always move because the only restrictions we have currently on moving is that if you are somebody who's an actual, like, who takes up physical space, then you had to use transactional occupy to get there, so no two people can occupy the same square in that sense. But for anything else, for things that are just moving that do not use transactional occupy, they can just move wherever they want. And so then at the end, I suspect we just at the very end after everything has moved, then we could go in and do a hit test, not this hit test. This is for cursor picking. But we should go in and just do a thing where we go, all right, now we'll check any bounding boxes versus each other. Now, again, we would rather have an explicit grid here. The fact that we don't have one is lame. We had done it in a very generic way so that you could do worlds that weren't grid-based. And we just don't need that. So a lot of stuff is overcomplicated now. Things that we don't, we easily should have probably just put down that constraint at the beginning to make things simpler, but we didn't. So it means that we kind of have a worse go of it here. And so probably what we want to do is collapse things back down to a grid, but I'm going to save that. I think I've said a couple times, I'm going to save that maybe just a little longer, because it's kind of something we can comb through a lot of code and delete a lot of code from the code base when we do that. It will sort of massively simplify a ton of things. But like kind of like how our lighting got massively simpler and faster when we switched it to planar, right? Planar is simpler than volumetric always, and grid-based is simpler than planar, pretty much. Sometimes that's not entirely true if the things you're doing are very sparse, but, Anyway, So after we loop over all of these entities, then I think we just want to do a check for collision. And the way that we would probably do this in the future is we would do it more based on the grid, right? But since we're not doing that here, we could do a second loop over entities. The problem with doing a second loop over entities is that that's going to touch literally everything a second time, which means that we kind of like, we'd end up in a situation where we're pulling everything back into the cache again, right? We've swept through it once, and now we're sweeping through it a second time, and it's just kind of wasteful, right? So my guess is that what we would probably prefer here is that if we had some way of just tracking what projectiles were active at a given time, that would be the more efficient way to do it. So I'm going to put this, I'm just going to mark this down because this is something that we want to think about more long term, and just say like, okay, this needs to become a loop over just projectiles, and grid accesses once the grid is here. Because really this is, so I'm going to do it in like the worst possible way. I'll do an n squared loop here. And then this wants to be replaced with inside here we track things that are actually going to do damage, and then we resolve the damage here after everyone's moved. So this will just be a loop over active projectiles, and this will just be a check for the grid squares immediately surrounding those projectiles. But prior to that, I'm going to call this projectile, or projector maybe, because we're probably going to actually want to change it into, an actual thing called projectile that's part of the entity. And this is going to be like the check thing we're checking the projectile against. So we have an entity that's the projectile, and we don't actually have to do this. It won't actually be n squared almost any time, because we can do a check here that's the same check we'll eventually do up here to save the projectiles into a separate list that's for faster checking. We presumably want to just check a flag on the entity that says whether or not this entity gets to participate in this sweep, right? And so the entity flags that we've got, and I don't even remember where those are in the game, but we'll jump to them here. So, we've got like some things here like event on collision and those sorts of things. These are all old flags. Sphere collision, that sort of stuff. These are all really old flags, and we probably will update them at some point. At the immediate moment, I'm just adding another one because, again, I'm not going to simplify stuff until I actually am done sort of sketching out what I actually want, if that makes sense. So don't ever mention new C++ syntax. C++ needs to die in a horrible fire, to say the very least. So what it would really look nice probably is JAI syntax, but I feel like we probably shouldn't port Handmade Hero to it. No, they definitely didn't. So here's what I will guarantee you about C++ for loop syntax. I have not even looked at it yet. I guarantee you it's completely wrong. I can just promise you they screwed it up entirely, because they have never added a single feature in the history of C++. The only thing I can think of, we had a long brainstorming session about this the other day with other people. The only thing that came up was align as seems like it's sort of, they didn't screw it up. For loop syntax, I guarantee you, if I went and looked at it, I'd just be like, this is the dumbest design I've ever seen for loop syntax. I guarantee you that. I just guarantee you. They've never been able, they've literally never known how to do stuff right, ever. And how to do that right is trivial. It's obvious how to do for loop syntax right. It's so obvious how you do for loop syntax right that it's a joke if you can't, but I guarantee you that they haven't. I'm just going to guarantee you that. Okay. It's like what John said on his last stream about namespaces. It's so blaringly obvious how you do namespaces correctly. The person who uses the namespace names the namespace. That's what prevents collisions, right? But they did it the other way around. The person who creates the namespace names the namespace. Like they just have no idea. Yeah, so Richard, that's terrible. That's absolutely ridiculous, right? And not how you would do it. If that's really what they came up with, that's absurd. Like, once again, they managed to swerve around the obvious answer to how you do for loops because it's so painfully clear how you do for loops. I don't even know how you have a language for 40 years and don't do them, but yeah. Anyway, so entity flags, we need something that's like Projectile or, a collider, something like this. And these will probably be, removed eventually. Sphere collision might not be, because we might still want sphere collision. I'm not sure whether it will always be Rust. I think the exact same thing. It's ridiculous how bad it is given that it's brand new. It's like almost as bad as C++, but that's not the bar you should be aiming for if you make a language in 2020, right? We managed to be maybe slightly better than C++, although we introduced a bunch of things that are actually worse than C++, so I don't know that you would necessarily say that, but it's just a joke. Modern languages are a joke. That's all I can say. Like, they're like barely passable as languages from 1975, but they're made in 2020, right? It's like, it's a joke. It's a joke how little improvement people have targeted for their languages that they're making literally 40 years after the languages they're more or less aping. It's just absurd. It's a joke. It's all just a stupid joke. Anyway, so projectile flags checked against collider is what will tell us whether or not we'll do a separate one here. And then for each of these, we'll just do if these two things collide, right? So if these two things collide, then we're going to go ahead and trigger whatever kind of like collision resolution event we want, which at the moment, I don't think we have anything other than projectile, right? Like in the game of the things I'm thinking of, there really isn't anything else. Projectiles might have a series of like different like they might have different things that they different properties, right? But they're not really going to be like, there aren't like multiple things. It's really just that, I think. So here's a question. How are we currently doing this? Because this is something that isn't that way. There's like where is it? So when you hop in front of like a character like this, so that volume check, I don't actually know what that's using. So I don't actually know what we did for that, but I think we just created a box that we check for which room you're in, right? And that's like a separate camera zoom kind of box. So even that, I mean, maybe we want this system to work that way, but maybe not. What's the obviously good for loop syntax? I almost don't want to say it because I'm just curious to know how long it will take these languages to figure out the obvious way you do for loops. If I don't say what the obvious way is, I honestly don't know. Like, is the answer like 10 years? Like, how long would it take an actual language to figure out how the frick is the... It's so obvious, I don't even know how it's not the standard way in every language, but it's not. So, I don't know. There might be a language out there with it. But I kind of now don't want to say it because I honestly want to know how long it would take. I don't know how long it would take. Years? Maybe JAI has it. I don't know. It might. I don't know. JAI might already have it, right? John tends to do things in a way where he's thought through it, which is rare, in language design. Normally they're not really thought through. They're just kind of done. But I don't know. I don't even know if JAI has it. I'm not sure. I should go look. I don't know if there's like I don't know if there's a stream where John shows that stuff. He was like talking about some of the basic for loop stuff, but there's like a really, really, really obvious thing you do with for loops, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. I do not know. Anyway, when I release Casey Lang, it'll use that for loop syntax that I think is the overwhelmingly obvious for loop syntax. And then you can tell me whether, you can remember today, you can tell me whether any language today had it when I release that. So. Yuka, that's pretty close. That's pretty close. If JAI has that. Yeah, as expected, right? It's not probably an accident that John did what I think is what is good, right? It's because he's thinking about programming instead of whatever the heck these other language designers think about, which I don't know what it is. Anyway, so we're going to have a entity that we check against, and we need to see whether their bounding, like just their bounds overlap. So this is not like a collision detector proper. This is literally just a simple check. And I don't know if we have one of those or not. I really just have no idea. If we've kind of got this sort of thing, and I guess that's it. Like, I think, I don't know. There was like a sphere collision thing, and that didn't seem to be that way necessarily. But I don't know. I don't really know. It's not my fault. It's not my problem. Anyway. If these two things overlap, then we're going to do like basically an application of damage or something else to this. But we're probably going to want some things that prevent this from happening in rapid succession. And there's a number of different ways you can do this. We'll probably do the action game style one. So the way action games typically do this, right, is when a projectile of some kind hits somebody, the person who gets hit by the projectile becomes like invincible for a short period of time, right? Now, there's two reasons for this. One reason is to give you a chance to like to make sure that you don't get hit by like 12 things at once and die, right, or whatever. But another reason is because it means we don't have to disambiguate the fact that on every frame you may be colliding, and you would keep doing damage every frame. So there's multiple ways that you can deal with that fact. One way is you can actually track the going from not colliding to colliding. So you remember that you weren't colliding on the previous time, and then you collide, when you go to collide the next time, you're good. You know that it's a new collision, right? So you can do that, but it's actually easier, and also maybe you don't really have to write any code besides a little timer to do the other way, which is just make you invincible for a little bit. And that has this sort of nice ancillary benefit of like making it so that making it. There's a couple things I should, I guess, mention here. So another way is the projectile gets deleted, or the projectile gets marked as done, right? In our case, I don't really think we have that, because like with something like the glove, for example, it's not going to get deleted. We could mark it as done, so the first time you hit something it returns, but I don't like that idea because I like the idea of there being gloves that continue to do damage, so you can hit multiple things with one swipe if there's multiple things in the way. Maybe some gloves don't do that, but at least some gloves would, right? So I don't want to presuppose that the glove always gets disabled when it hits something and only gets re-enabled when it returns to you, right? I don't like that idea. So yeah. On the other hand, for punching enemies, while I don't really want you to be able to punch the same enemy multiple times, I suppose I do want you to be able to punch... Yeah, this is tricky. So I think I may actually want something that properly tracks new collision. Like... Yeah, I don't know. This is particularly tricky for the glove, is I guess what I would say. Because I want the glove to properly be able to punch things, like when it is... So let's turn off this weird like slow test thing that I had there. And because we just kind of hard coded in an attack pattern here, we just made one up, right? Normally these would be specific to like the glove or whatever, and you pick them up. So the thing that I was curious about here is like, so let's say we were doing like an attack pattern like this. Right? And I can stop doing that little like pattern draw nonsense. We had a little thing there that tries to draw the movement for when we were like doing a little bit of debugging there. It was this piece right here. And we don't actually need that for anything now. But the point is, if you're doing something like this, you want to be able to repeatedly punch the same enemy as well, right? So that part is a little confusing. Like how we would want it to just be, as soon as it... Yeah, I don't know. So, a trivial way you could do it that would work with one glove is you just have a sequence number on the glove, basically. Oh, wait a minute. That actually works for everything, doesn't it? Huh. Okay, so actually, yeah, I suppose this would work for anything, now that I think about it. So if you put a sequence number that's a global sequence number for all entities, so every time any entity gets an attack, the attack is labeled with a sequence number, and that sequence number increments by 1 each time. All colliders, so all other entities in the world, they just store the last sequence number that hit them. And if the sequence number of the thing that's trying to hit them is greater than the sequence number of the last thing that hit them, then they update their sequence number and that's recorded as a hit. Right? Right? So that would work just fine. It requires all things that can be hit to record one sequence number, which is maybe a bit much. Wouldn't that mean a slow projectile could be invalidated by a later fast projectile? Yeah, I think you may be right. And also, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, it's too much storage. Because you probably could have just stored for each projectile the list of things it hit in much less space. Right? So that may be too clever. So I don't know. So there's one other way we could think about doing this, which is maybe more specific to this game. Another way we could think about doing this too, I suppose, would be that there's a specific time at which the hitbox activates, so that it only activates on one frame anyway. That's more like a real punch in a fighting game, where like in fighting games you don't get credit for hitting somebody throughout the entire punch. You only get credit during the specific hitbox activation periods, right? So I don't know. I really don't know. It's a good question. This normally you solve this problem by just you don't really do this, right? Like you don't try to solve this problem in most action games. They don't actually try to. But in this particular case, I feel like we actually do want to, because we want the glove to be able to do those things. And we also have, we already have in the game we can't just do something just for the glove, because we already have the notion that like this still works, right? Like I can still create another hero. And I don't actually know whether anyone will ever play the game this way, because maybe the game won't really be fun to play with multiple heroes or whatever. You can imagine that if that did work, you wouldn't want to not ship multiplayer just because you didn't have a solution for multiple gloves, right? I wonder how far out I can get that, because I don't remember what the movement limit is. Is it 3? If you just keep wailing on the button. I would like the simplest possible thing that satisfies those constraints. So I don't really want to have to put in something complicated here, but I'm not really quite thinking of if there is some obvious solution that's not complicated. I'm struggling to think of what it actually is. Furthermore, like some other simple solutions like, colliders just store who they're colliding with so that if it's the same person as last round, they don't do damage. I feel like that fails if a collider happens to overlap two people. It's a somewhat rare case, but it definitely could happen, right? So if there's two enemies right next to each other and the glove happens to overlap both of their bounding boxes because of it's placed just so, or something like that, then it would oscillate between them presumably and continue to do damage all the time. Because if you only store one thing that's in contact with, then that, it's not enough. You have to be able to store when you become uncontacted with something, so that there can be as many as you might overlap have to be tracked. So I don't know. I think we might be back to just basically we got to track the list. They're just a list of people who were overlapping on the previous frame. I honestly can't think of anything else that you could do. If anyone has any idea of something simpler, I'm happy to entertain it, but I can't think of anything that would be that's I can't think of anything that's gonna be like simpler and still work. Because if you have a list of the things that you were in contact with on the previous frame, that's definitely all the information that you need, right? Because when you do your collision pass on the following frame, you basically go, well, anybody I'm colliding with now that I wasn't colliding with before, that's a hit. And that solves all the problems, right? But it does require you to store all of the people with whom your entity overlaps returned true. Like for whom it returned true, you have to know that list. And we could, bound it. We could say like, well, that's never going to be more than 4 people or something. So we can probably keep it from being some like arbitrarily complicated thing, I suppose. But it's still somewhat fancy, right? So yeah, I don't know. I guess we're just gonna go with that for now because I can't really think of how else you might do it. So let's suppose that we did something like that, and in the future maybe we can store those in some kind of an active projectile list that's like a separate thing. Because right now, obviously, our entity stuff is pretty piggy. And, if we want to get that down in the future, although computers are so freaking fast these days, if you use web software, you wouldn't think so, but they're so fast that even though this stuff is totally ridiculously unoptimized, like to the nth degree unoptimized, it still just runs just fine, which is absolutely absurd. But that's just a testament to how fast computers are. They just don't seem it, right? What can you do? So anyway, if we did want to keep something like this, let's just sketch that out. So this is just going to be like an entity collider list or something like that. And I guess it's not even a list. It's really just an array or a group. And in here we would just say, yeah, all right, there's an entity ID for like colliders, and it's like we got some in there, and that's it. You know what I mean? And I don't really know. I don't really know that it needs to be anything more than that. But effectively, all we're going to do is just store that in there and check if the entity that in question is in there or not, right? So the way this would work is, again, incredibly simple. We just have we would make a new one here, an entity collider group. Oops. Not literally right here. Every time we look at a particular projectile, we would make a new group here, and we'd probably have the old group. We'd just like pull it out, like so. So we have the old group and the new group. Well, you don't even really need to clear the new group because we can just say like collide count equals 0. Right. So when we go through here and we do like if this guy is a collider, and I guess technically all this stuff can live inside here, although that's really neither here nor there because nothing actually happens. But when we loop through all the people, when we find somebody who overlaps, we add them to the list of colliders. And we'd probably do something like this. If collide count is less than the number of slots we have in the, what is the name of this thing again? Just colliders. I guess let's just do IDs. So if we have room in the IDs for this, then we record it. So we just do like collide count plus plus equals whatever this particular thing is we're about to hit, right? And maybe we assert here and we just say like collider overflow so that we know, because maybe this needs to be 8, who knows. For our game, we don't want it to ever fail, so we don't want this to produce like well, it wouldn't really be a crash, but a corruption or anything. So we want to make sure we don't do it. But we also want to make sure we know if we've set this value low enough that it ever really happens in gameplay. So that's just my way of knowing what this, so I can see what this value reasonably has to be to prevent it from actually occurring in practice. You know what I'm saying? So then in entity, when we get the overlapping entity, we're recording him in this group, and then we need to do a check here to see whether or not it's new. So we assume it's new, then we go through here and we'd set it to false if it matches, right? Like this kind of thing. So we would say, the collide count is just going to be whatever the old group IDs are. And yeah, you know what? I guess this does need to be this way unless we want to store the U32 of the count, which we don't want to. And clearing this, if compilers weren't absolute garbage every day, all day, this wouldn't be a big deal anyway because this is literally just 2 64-bit values, right? It's 4 32-bit values, so it's like it's 2 registers worth. It's nothing, right? Of course, compilers will do amazing things like turn this into a frickin' memset because they're, I don't know. Because the compiler and the C++ standard are basically written by the same kind of people who don't know how to code. All right. So when we actually look at this and we go, like, let's loop through the indices here and see if any of these were existing ones. For those of you who like SIMD things, you will notice that we could probably do all this thing with a single U128 register. But, we're not at that state. This would just be a move mask. We don't really do SIMD here much on Handmade Hero. But point being, if you're into SIMD programming, you should be thinking in your head here about how this would be clearly that. when we find one, we just need to do like, a check to see. And when we find one, we just say that it's not a new collision anymore. But that's all we needed, right? So like it's literally, we don't even need to know what position it was in. This is why I say, if you think SIMD, you can obviously see how this would be something that you would SIMD pretty quickly. So we look to see, does it match? If it does match, this isn't a new collision, and we don't need to keep looking, obviously. And then here, we finally get to our collision resolution call. So like this is like collision resolve or whatever. And in theory, anyway, because we're checking these things, this should only happen on a new collision, meaning we stopped colliding with the entity, and now we recollide with the entity, or we've never collided with the entity. Either of those two things, right? So this is where we would do the actual collision event. It would happen here, and it would get resolved. How we want it to get resolved is now getting into gameplay code, unfortunately. And, Jonathan Blow, conveniently, I might add, is apparently on a plane from San Francisco back to Florida today. So he's not here to tell us what we would do in that code, but, normally your game designer is going to have something to say about this and what's going to happen in here, right? Like, engine programmer has to produce this part. Not from San Francisco, from Ohio. Yes, that's right. He was at GDEX. I've never heard of what that is. But I guess it's a Midwest game conference of some kind. Something like that. I don't know. Hellman Munster. Start going stairs on YouTube. Currently day 4. Do you want to tell someone just starting? No, not particularly. No, not really. I think, it managed to capture the process pretty well, I think. It's a little off because it's a little bit weird programming in such small chunks. It's hard to do much. 600 episodes still ends up being something like 1,000 hours of programming, which is like almost no programming. So it's a little challenging to produce anything good that way. But, it sort of captures something like it, Yeah. It captures programming to a certain extent. It doesn't really, the thing it doesn't do is capture the real, like, the really good programming, because, like, it only happens when you, like, spend 16 hours, like, looking at something continuously, like you're just looking at it all day and you look at it all day the next day, and you just can't capture that on stream. Your brain is only half engaged, so you're at 50%, when you're programming on stream, and that's fine for simple stuff, but, like, it's just not good enough for things like complicated code, like the lighting code or the debug system. Like, getting those things to be good is just, I don't know how doable it is on stream. I can certainly go do it all off stream and do all the learning, right, about exactly how I like to do those things. And then I can do something on stream and it comes out right. But that's because I already knew, right? I already basically knew the hard parts of the answer, and reconstructing them again in code is not hard if you have, the experience, right? But, like, the real, like, extremely good things, they just don't happen on a stream, I guess is what I'd say. some accidental discoveries do sometimes, like the way to do the perfectly round interpolated light source thing by using negative numbers in the lights. That was an example of like, oh, hey, I accidentally stumbled upon this by going, hey, I wonder if this would work, and then it does. We had a couple of those moments, but the really like insightful, like hardcore code stuff, it just doesn't happen on stream. That's just, and I don't think it ever is gonna. I just don't, because no matter who you are or how smart you are, some part of your brain is required to talk to do the stream. And that part is not working on the code at that time, right? And so I think that just means that whoever the person is, their best moments will never be the ones that they're streaming. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I would say, really. Otherwise, I think, yeah, it's mostly what you would expect, I think. Yeah. I don't think there's much else to say about it. Because capturing mistakes and things like that was like the point of streaming the whole thing. You know what I mean? So, you don't really want to say those up front. The point is to see how you recover from things or try different things. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I would say. All right, back to our story. I mean, this is basically the code. This is basically all there is. Once we're done doing one of these passes, we just change the list over to the new one, right? So hopefully everyone can see how this works. It's really but simple. We're just going over anything that's a collider, that's one of these things that wants to do stuff when it runs into somebody. And all we're doing is saying, look, we've got a list of the things that it hit on the last frame. We run through all the entities, and again, like I said, this wants to be a spatial query, so this is very inefficient the way it's being done, but it'll be done exactly the same way, just with a more efficient query. Iterate over the things you might collide with. Right now it's everybody, but in the future it would be a subset. You see whether or not you do collide, and if you do collide, then you go ahead and add it to the list of things for next frame to track. And you use the list from the previous frame to see whether or not this is a new collision and should have an event, right? Now, we can also do another thing in here. If we want to, we can have an exit collision as well, right? Because we could also say, well, at the end of this, compare these two groups and see if anyone who was in the old group is now not in the new group. That's an exit event. I can't think of anything offhand of why we want exit events, right? So I don't think we need to do that extra work, but you could trivially do it. So you would just compare these two and see if anyone from old group doesn't appear in new group. That's it, right? And as an aside for SIMD people, just, if you're interested in SIMD programming, what I was trying to say here is, like, you can kind of see what goes on. If you have an array of, let's say this was 8, right, which is the natural AVX width. So the AVX width in x64, the AVX, which is the processor you're likely programming on, has AVX. The AVX width is going to be 32 bytes, which is 8 4-byte values. This entity collider group, if it was one AVX register large, would store 8 entity IDs, right? If you wanted to do the check to see whether your old group and your new group had anything in common, right? It's just 8 pairs of instructions, right? It's broadcast one of the IDs from the old group to all 8 lanes, one instruction. Second instruction is compare against the single register that holds all 8 IDs from the new group, right? That's basically it. You could do it a different way with a rotate as well, but you can do those, and then you effectively just have a very small number of actual tests, right? So instead of 8 to 8 being 64 tests, 8 to 8 is only 16 tests, right? You know what I'm saying? And so, like, you know, and that's not even probably the smartest way. Like, I'd have to think about other ways you might do it. There's probably ways that are smarter than that, right? In terms of just the efficiency of getting the things into the right places. In fact, yeah, I'm not going to overthink it, but let's put it this way. There's a bunch of stuff you could do here, right? So you can always be looking for places where you can do creative stuff if all you care about, and the same would be true of this, right? So this code would, instead of a loop at all, this code would just be one load broadcast. So it would be load this 32-bit value and broadcast to all lanes of the AVX register, and then one comp and one mask move, right? Or move mask. You know what I'm saying? So rather than literally checking 8 times in a loop, dun, 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 it would be 3 instructions total, right? Because the processor just has to do those steps anyway, you might as well use the 8 lanes. Yeah. All right. So, that's all I was going to point out is that, you know, these are the sorts of things that nowadays I just kind of write everything that way. But the Handmade Hero code base is not that kind of a code base, right? So it's still scalar. But point being, this is all we really need, is what we have here. That's the entirety of the code, and really all we need to, I mean, we have to debug it and make sure it works and all that, but that's really all we need. The optimization will have to come a little bit later. This is probably not going to work. I mean, it will because computers are so freaking fast, but it's very wasteful. The number of checks that will actually get done here is vastly more than need to happen. So when we actually do, also we should probably check to make sure that collisions are on for this second person, because like, I assume event on collision or something. I don't know. Like, let's just look at what these are, but we need a flag that says whether or not you're somebody who actually does it. So it looks like these are not even used anymore, right? So maybe when I say remove, we actually just remove these because they really are removable, right? So if we remove that flag, that collision flag, no one cares. If we remove allows motion on collision, that's a thing. So what does that mean? Allows motion on collision is there here and here, but so I think that's because we had, yeah, I think we can just get rid of that as well, because we don't care about those collision volumes at all, because they're not set for the things we actually care about. So I think we want to set these things that are going to get collided with need to be sort of marked as such. So let's actually take a look here at how we want to do this. I don't really know. Oh, let's take a look at sphere collision as well. So suppose we remove sphere collision. What does that look like? So it looks like the glove is set to sphere collision, and so I'm going to get rid of that as well, because I just don't care about this stuff right now, so we're just going to leave it like this. So we got rid of those that we were from the old stuff. We now have a collider. I think I want, like, collision receiver, or receives collision. You know what I mean? And, like, applies collision or something like that. Because we sort of have this, you know, it's a little bit idiosyncratic in this game. It's just kind of the way the game design sort of wants to be, for lack of a better term, that we've got things that are supposed to be doing hits and things that are supposed to be receiving hits, and they're not the same things, right? Like, sometimes in a more, like, physicsy based game, you know what I mean? You don't have really that dichotomy, like everything is kind of just involved in the physics. But in this game, it's like very regimented, like things hop around on squares, and that's separate from like these gloves or bullets or whatever there's going to be that are completely different. So some games are like that, and some games aren't. In this case, I think our game is basically, it's the kind of game where you manually say in the design, specifically these things are going to apply collision, they go out into the world and hit things, and then these other things receive collision, and they're not the same, right? So I think we effectively want it that way, where we say you've got to mark anything that shoots is an applies collision, anything that gets hit is a receives collision, and that's just non-negotiable. Assuming those two things are true, then we call the like collision resolve with the projectile and the thing that the projectile hit. And we probably want to pass the sim region as well. I don't know what else we would necessarily do. Oh, we can eliminate that now too, can't we? We can receive the sim region, and I don't think we need anything else. So we'll just tack that on there in case, because we might need that for like spatial queries or whatever. So I don't know that we have anything like this. I think we did have a little thing for collision resolution before, maybe. It may have gotten removed. I don't remember. You don't. So this, oh, yeah. I was going to say when we were doing this, I was like, didn't we have a thing for this already? We did a long time ago, the pairwise collision rule thing. Remember this? I don't think we ever actually saved that. Like, it doesn't exist anymore, but this part of it remained. You remember this? Long ago, like, we had a little sword thing. Long ago. Right? So we can't punch... No, you can punch trees. You just have to mark them as punchable. Right? The designer chooses whether you can punch trees, is what I'm trying to say. Right? Like, if the designer says you can punch trees, then you can punch trees. If they don't, then you can't, right? It's not that everything always gets punched, and, you know, then the designer sets the punch damage to 0 for the tree or something like that, right? They literally say for every type of thing in the game whether it's something that gets punched, right? But you could set the trees to punchable. That's totally fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. This is all old code too. Particles, like, we have a full particle thing now, so that's not a thing anymore. All this old stuff. Anyway, so I don't know that we have the collision stuff. I don't know that can collide really gets used anymore either. So I'm gonna sort of get rid of that. And it's just down to resolving collisions. Resolving collisions, we don't really have anything at the moment. This is gonna get complicated in here for sure. So assuming that we have an applier and a receiver, this is where the collision, resolution code would happen. It's going to get a lot more complicated. For right now, I guess we would just reduce the hit points of the receiver, which, is some simple value here. Like, we don't even really know what's going on here. Do we already have code for this from ancient, like day, 50? Show me all the hit point code. So this draws the hit points. That initializes hit points, but no, there's no code for it. So basically, we can just do whatever we want here. I have no idea how this code is supposed to work or what it's supposed to do. I assume that hit point max. So if we want to remove a hit point from somebody, these hit points are like whether or not they're full is like in their filled amount. Like who knows what the heck? I have no idea what any of this stuff does. So let's start with this. Let's start by maybe we'll make one of those little snake dudes. Well, first of all, I need some hit points. I mean, I guess I want to always win at my own game, right? So we should make me have infinite hit points or something, which is what I have now. But, in order to make the game any fun, the hero's gotta have to be able to die. So those snake pieces all have little hit point placeholder markers below them, right? Those are little, like, temporary... There's little boxes that we drew to show that there were hit points on the stupid snake thing that always gets stuck in the corner. He sticks his own self in the corner. So the stupid snake thing already has hit points, and so when I hit one of those snake pieces there, we want to do something with the hit points, right? And, I mean, presumably we just start with the dumbest thing, which is that when you hit, you take away a hit point. And these are probably going to get a lot more complicated over time. I don't know what the heck hit point subcount is. I mean, what did I do? Write the game or something? So what is it? So it looks like hit point subcount is just the name that we gave to how filled hit points get, I guess. So it's like the subdivisions, right? That's really what it is. Let's name it a little more clear, right? So it's saying that like a hit point has this many like sub hit points. You know what I'm saying? That's actually true, Sagan. Or Sagian, sorry. I literally tried to download... People watch me do it on stream. I assume you were there. I tried to download... I was like, I want to play Minecraft. It's one of the most popular games in the world. I like to play it. I tried to buy it. I put in my credit card number. It didn't work. I tried PayPal. That didn't work. So I've still never played Minecraft. I've bought dozens of games since then with the same credit card, but like Microsoft couldn't figure it out. They were like, we do not know how to charge a credit card to buy Minecraft. Like, we're never going to know. Sorry. We tried their own browser. We tried Edge. They wrote the browser. Well, they didn't write it. They rebundled it. but it's the one they ship. Like if they don't test Edge, what do they test? It's the one they ship with Windows. So I tried it on both that and Firefox, if I remember correctly, and neither could do it. And I tried both PayPal and their built-in credit card thing, and neither of those worked. So it's just like, all right, great. I guess I'm never playing Minecraft. I don't care. I probably wouldn't even like Minecraft, so it doesn't matter. But it's just kind of lame because, like, I wanted to just see Minecraft. And Microsoft couldn't do it. Like, that was way too much for them to charge a credit card and give you an execute. They had no idea how that would happen, right? All right, so we want to go to the receiver guy here, and this is not really what we want to do all the time because there's going to be plenty of times when this isn't the case. But like, I guess I'm just gonna maybe I'll do like an apply damage call, just anticipating the fact that I'm gonna want to be able to do this at different times. It's getting a little bit ahead, which I don't normally like to do. But I just kind of know that I will want to be able to do this, right? So if I take an entity, I want to be able to apply some damage, and we don't really know how damage is going to like affect, right, this, we don't know how we're going to record damage, restore damage, or any of those sorts of things. So we're still in the early days of that sort of stuff because, again, this game design is not really what I do. But we know here we could just say, like, there's a count for now, which is how much damage. And maybe for now the count's just 1 because, I mean, we, again, don't know. So we're going to fill this in as we start to, like, add random gameplay features. I just go in here and, monkey with this until we have some better idea of, like, what's actually going on when you apply damage, right? So now in here, we go to the hit points, and I think what we do is we walk backwards. I mean, I don't really know. Like I said before, we've got these hit points, and there's flags. The flags are not defined anywhere as far as I can tell, so there's no actual flags or anything like that. And then we have this filled amount here, right? And I think the idea is that eventually this is kind of going to be like a thing where you like you can have properties attached to the hit point, that kind of thing. There's nothing there yet, right? We don't even have like a guess as to what that would be because, again, that's game design, not programming. So that's like more like, what do you want? If that makes sense. So we're only really looking at filled amount, and presumably this goes from the back like downward, I assume. So we would do something like the hit point max. Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe it's drawn in the other order. I guess I don't know. What order is it drawn in? If hit point max is greater than or equal to 1, otherwise known as greater than 0, the health index is less than the max, and we plus it. We draw the filled amount. So I don't know. how we want to do this exactly. I'm going to just type in some garbage first. And I'm going to say, like, all right, hit point index is equal to the hit point max, like, -1. And in this case, I guess we would have to step back down through it this way. It's kind of ugly, right? But I think this is roughly what you'd have to do. Which is why I say maybe it should be stored in the other order so that it's easier to work with this way. But we'll see. Anyway, so we have hit points. And these... Is it hit point? It is. So we have, like, entity hit points. And we want to see, like, okay, we have some count that we're going to decrement here. And I guess what we would say is, in here, we also want to say that count is not 0. Right? So, because we're going to take off as many hit points, like, by subtracting them from the thing as we go, applying it each individual time. And another way to say that is we may want this to be like more like a for loop. I don't know. We'll see, because if you actually want to do this, you may want to do it each time. Like, in other words, this apply damage may be more like something you call repeatedly because too much logic has to occur, so you don't pass, like, a number. You know what I mean? So it's hard to say. I'm not sure. I think I might say that you call it repeatedly. I think that's what you're going to do. Because this will end up being very complicated with, like, a bunch of flags and crap for each hit. So if you're applying more than one of those, I think they probably have to be called multiple times to do different logic. Probably. I don't really know. This is not going to be a performance bottleneck because the amount of damage that gets applied on any given frame is fairly low. Even if it's in, like, the hundreds, it's not going to be a big deal one way or the other. So I think it's probably doesn't really matter. Anyway, so we look at the last hit point here. We say, like, if hit, and there's this, like, filled amount, I guess. So if hit filled amount, we subtract, right, and break, and that's it, I think. So that's applying damage. We apply damage to the receiver, always. And now, in order to make this do anything, we would have to... We probably are going to, need to do stuff like apply some reaction stuff and spawn particles and all that kind of stuff. But for right now, we just want to get this to a point where it does the actual gameplay action. So in add player with the glove, we would have to OR in the entity flag of applies collision. And for something like a Monstar, like in here, we would need... okay. Where's the snake? There it is. I'm like, we know there's a snake in here somewhere. So for the snake, anything in here, we would need to add the, like, for the head, we would put in receives collision, and for the segment, same. So now, in theory, the glove can punch and the snake can receive punches. Again, totally in theory. But again, just sketching out what this should look like so we can start to build like a little sort of system for processing gameplay style events, right? And we should put a snake in the room with us here so that we can not have to hop around on tiles to open up the door. But let's see if we can punch this thing here. Hopefully this guy will get himself trapped in a corner again. It was a mistake to make the thing multiple times. This thing doesn't draw differently if you it doesn't look like it though. Like, it doesn't look like I'm getting any off of it. It doesn't draw until you would hit 4 times, right? Because those would be set to 4, but doesn't look like it. So let me see if we're getting an interrupt in the collision or not. So in applied damage, for example, you can see it's not triggering, right? So we're not actually doing it, and we're not sure why. Let's see if we ever actually process any colliders at all, would be the next thing. So in here, where we're doing the entity update, so we are checking, right? Like someone's checking, because we're getting into this code. Is anyone getting here? And part of that is I got to go check to make sure any of these things have collision volumes, because they might not. In which case, that's kind of why, right? In fact, we can do that pretty easily by just turning on collision volume drawing. So in the world mode, not world mode, in the entity code, there's at the end, there's the thing that draws collision volumes. It's that. So here are the collision volumes in the game, and that has collision volume. Oh, the glove's collision volume is weirdly, like, not attached to the glove. I guess I know why that would be. But it doesn't matter because that's still obviously colliding, right? We'll work on that in a second, isn't it? Oh, no, it's not. Yeah, it is. No, that is. That is. That's still obviously colliding. I was like, I thought it was too low at first there, but it's fine. So it's obviously colliding, so we have the overlap code is like busted or something, right? Like you can see that that's obviously colliding and should produce a collision somehow. I assume that means this isn't working because I assume we set this receives collision so that it would be the entity overlaps entity code that's not working. But I guess I don't actually know that. I mean, maybe that flag isn't set, but I'm pretty sure we literally just set that code in the snake. You know, that's not supposed to be equals. That's supposed to be or equals. By the way. We should probably make an add flag function so that I don't accidentally make that typo. Since we've already seen me make it once, you can certainly make it again. Anyway, so I think we need to go find out maybe if there's something wrong with that entity overlap code. I guess. That looks extremely straightforward. So that's kind of weird. Let's double check. Like, that's very weird, wouldn't you say? Because it sure looks like that should be firing. Let's double check here. We've got this check here. What I'm wondering is, like, should we just separate this out like so? That way I can see where we actually get in here. Because now I'm just not sure. So I'd like to know, you know, whether this... We also need these to not be equal the same person. So basically, as long as this thing can receive collision and the projectile IDs are set, right? That seems like something we want. Yeah, is there an add flags? There is. I like that. We should have a function that does this. Parentheses, we already do. I just didn't call it. That was pretty funny. I like that. You know that function? We should have that function. Yeah, we do have that function. You just didn't call it. So I suppose if I really wanted to do it, I could change the flags to be like flags underscore so that it's like clear that you should not be using it directly, but I don't know that I want to go that far. That might be a bit much. Okay, so what is the problem here? I want to know if we're ever getting in here. That's not a good sign. Why can I not set any breakpoints in there? What? Is there something really... Is there something really stupid going on here where it is optimized the whole thing out because I typed something stupid? Or is that just like a debugger trick? I'll have to go look at the assembly in a second. I mean, I can do it in a different way than that as well, but... I don't know why that was up 4 when it didn't need to be, but that's not a problem. If the projectile ID and the check ID are not equal, which is true almost all the time, right? Aha. It was a typo. Good on the compiler for optimizing that out. Bad on me for having the typo. All right, so we really need to put a snake in this. In fact, let's just do that because anytime I restart the game, I suppose I didn't really need to restart the game for that, but I do like to restart the game now and again, and I don't want to have to hop around to get all that stuff for no particular reason. So in world gen, I don't even remember like why it's set up this way. Probably because we wanted to hop on things ourselves and not have the snake hop on them, I'm guessing. I actually don't even really know. But so when we create the dungeon, I guess the floor entrance room is... Well, why? Yeah, what kind of room is this? Why is this room this way? Also, we need to stop having box index down as a thing because we don't have that anymore. But, yeah, I'm not sure. You can see what we do here. We, when we place the hero, it's in dungeon entrance room, right? So the entrance room is this floor entrance room, which is this thing. And I guess I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure why it doesn't have a snake. I guess because we only add snakes to the rooms after it. So if we wanted to add a snake, I guess we would just do this. Why is that able to hop through me, I wonder? Oh, because it started on top of me. Interesting. We have to fix that. All right, so we should now be able to figure out why we can't punch these things. Hopefully. I mean, maybe. Right. Right, so that's clearly going through. Right. So let's take a look at what happens breakpoint-wise here. So pointer and check the two entities here. We want to see if we get here. We do now. Do we ever get here? We do. So we're actually calling the collision resolution function, apparently. Supposedly. But it doesn't look like that function ever actually does anything. Yeah, it doesn't think this is a thing that it needs. Ah. How did it... So how did this work? Like, it's supposed to be that. What did the compiler do with that exactly? Do I even want to know? I probably don't. And I still can't set a breakpoint here. So it still doesn't think it needs to call that function. Right? So what did it actually do? It has the notion that, let's see if we can just look at what the disassembly is there. Like, what actually happens right here? Like, nothing. Alright, so something's up with applied damage. Right, something's up with this that it thinks... So if entity hit point max is greater than 0, hit point index equals the hit point max minus 1, hit point index is greater than or equal to 0, and you subtract down. We look at the hit point. If it is filled, we subtract it. Doesn't look obviously ridiculous. That's a bit odd. Say that. Say that much. All right, so I'm going to look at this in debug mode because I don't understand exactly what the compiler is doing there. So I must have had a typo somewhere in there. We'll find out in a second. All right. So, you know, slow debug mode. So here's collision resolve. We step in to apply damage, and we look at the entity. The hit point max is 3, right? So we would go in here. We then set the hit point index. So the hit point index should be 2, right? Right? That means we'll get the last hit point. The filled amount is 4. We subtract it to get 3. We break out of the loop. And that's... I mean... that's exactly what we assume would happen. So now I'm a little confused, because that's like the correct behavior, right? So yeah. What's up with that? Is there something weird going on in there that I'm not thinking of? Like, so now this should be able to punch these guys, and they should go down. 4 punches should remove 1 of the little hearts on there. And, you know, in debug mode, it's kind of hard to do because the lighting is too slow. So it takes, yeah, so it works. All right, so it works just fine. I guess let's see if release mode was just, the assembly was just done in a really strange way or something. I don't know if I believe that, but... so it works. All right. So I guess the assembly just optimized it into the loop in a way that was like going to be kind of hard for me to read, I guess, because I didn't immediately see it. But I guess it's just simple enough that that's what happened. All right, so you can punch out these dudes here, and that's fine, right? And there you go. Presumably we need a thing where, like, if the damage goes to 0, so like if entity hit point 0 equals, you know, or rather hit point 0 filled amount equals 0, then this entity has to die, probably, right? And I don't actually know. I also kind of feel like this probably was annoying, so I'm just going to do this for now. Because we're going to want to do this sort of crap. So do we have like like some kind of way of testing if an entity is still valid? Because we don't really need to do any of this work if the entity like already died or things like that. But I don't actually know. We probably want to introduce that now because gameplay is going to care about that in a lot of places. But I don't know if we really have anything like that. So we should probably add something like that. Like there should be a thing here that's like, if, you know, is active or something. So like these things are only happening, you know, they have these checks for whether or not an entity should be doing stuff or not. And that would be that the flags are set a certain way. So like in the entity itself, you've got if entity flags deleted and active, right, has to just be equal to active. I think that's basically what we want. Critical hits, probably not, because that's very game designy. Like, I don't really understand like entropy in game design. A critical hit is basically just a way of having a average amount of damage that's not equal to the so a critical hit is basically when you say, normally if I have 10 hits and the average damage is, let's say 40, then each hit did 4 damage, right? A critical hit is a way of making the average damage still be 40, but some of the hits are worth 2 and some of the hits are worth 8, right? So it's a way of making a non-linear, it makes it non-linear, the function, right, of the non-monotonic, the damage over time. It goes like that, right? Which I'm sure is like very important to like crafting certain kinds of experiences. And if you're like if you're a game designer who's like really into game design stuff, you would know when you need that. But I don't know those kinds of things. That's game design, not game programming, right? And so, yeah. So, I probably wouldn't implement critical hits because I wouldn't know what to do with them, right? Like, I mean, I guess I could implement them just to implement them, but I wouldn't actually have any idea what to do with it. You know what I mean? All right, so we need, on entity deletion right now, we don't deoccupy their square. So, like, I can't still occupy it, right? So we kind of need to, like, clean that stuff up, right? But this basically works now. Yeah. So that's good. When an entity gets removed, I don't even know when we do that, but I believe it's in the sim region. Maybe not. Is it in the world stuff? So when an entity is deleted, the remove from unpacked flag gets set, and that's when it goes away. Right. So in delete entity, I would assume like right there we would probably want to free up its traversable. So like in transactional occupy, this part here, so I'm not sure. I like test wall. So much stuff in here from the old days. Yeah, test wall is not still a piece of this code. So I'm not sure about how traversables, we probably want to clean that up too, because I don't even know if we really need them anymore, because when we switch to the grid we'll get rid of them. But for now you can see what happens. So we say here's where we want to go, and that's all fine, but what we really care more about here is where we're coming from. So it's this one, and what we basically do here is say clear. So I guess it's the clear function on these particular occupiers, which of course we can't find because for some reason 4-quarter does not like to list the actual thing that you would need to know, which is what the parameter of the function was. So yeah, I don't know. Is it just literally that? So what that's like all that gets cleared in transaction? I guess that's all that needs to get cleared. So I guess it's literally this, like, so in delete entity, we just say, well, get the traversable for this sim region and this reference. So the entity, occupying, we then say if there was one, basically this is like our vacate, right? We're leaving this now. We just clear it. So entity traversable point, this thing, the prev occupier and occupier. I don't actually know what the heck prev occupier, why we need that, but it's basically this. Now since that's used in 2 places, I'll probably make it just a single thing. So, maybe we just have a thing here that's like vacate. Where we just do this operation. So the mover ref is just the traversable reference, I guess. So it's not quite that. So it's like that. This code can now just be used in both places. So we just say like, look, vacate this mover ref thing, right? And then this code is used in here and can be used in here. So we just call vacate sim region entity occupying. Now I don't know that we need to pass it as an address because we never write to it. So I think it can actually be done that way. So it would look more like this, but otherwise it's the same. Identifier not found. What? What? Well, fine then. Meow, 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 meow. Okay. So I believe we can now properly play through. And so, yeah, we're rapidly going to be moving into the part of the situation where we have to do some design stuff now. Which is fine. But we can clear these guys now, right? Technically. Although we would want to really like do a much better job on the AV of that so that it feels good to punch people, but so that it feels good to punch people, just like in real life. So we need to like do a bunch of work on the presentation of it, but thus far we now don't really have to worry too much about getting through a dungeon. We can punch people technically. We should probably make there be a way for us to get hit, obviously. That's probably the next obvious thing to do. Which is presumably just getting hit by enemies that hop into the square with us. I guess, right? I don't know. And there's another thing we have to do as well, which is that the glove may not do damage all the time. So when the glove is returning from a punch, it shouldn't do damage, right? So we're going to have to change the flag stuff to be a little bit more dynamic. Like maybe the glove gets its flag set depending on what move state it's in or something like that, right? So that seems fine. We should also stop the violence. We should stop drawing the we should stop like having the box down stuff on generation, like because we can't go up and down anymore, right? We decided we pulled that out. So the direction stuff, the box direction, I don't remember what it's called. No. It's like direction something, which I don't remember what it is, but basically like the box down thing. In here, box index down, whatever that is not a thing anymore. This. Right? So box index up and down, that isn't a thing anymore. So we kind of want to get rid of it. I mean, I don't know who uses it exactly, but we probably don't want it anywhere. Anymore? Maybe? Not really sure. Alright. 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 So I think we can just pretty much remove them. It doesn't look like anybody uses it, right? So we can say those go away, and these go away. We can check this and say that it's not really sure why that was checking against box index up when there's already a box index count. But yeah, I don't know about that. It's a bit suspicious. Get rid of this. I guess this is gonna be down. So if we're connecting the room above and it's saying it's a downward connection, this would probably be a northward connection, and it's not room above anymore, obviously. This is just not a thing. You can't have stairwells. And so now I think we have the problem of our room packer, as crappy as it is just going to run out of stuff to do, right? Like it's going to assert that it runs out of room because it's super terrible. Which is not really a huge deal. Where's our generate world thing? Because we know we have to fix that anyway. But in the interim, so I just wanted to get rid of those, and then I don't know. I'm going to set the floor count to 1 because we got to redo this code anyway. So let's see if it packs a single floor correctly with its super crappy nonsense. No, it doesn't. So you can see like the problem here is the layout thing being as dumb as it is. It just puts in the rooms and can't find a place to put the rooms when it can't go down, right? At least I believe that's what that's telling it, right? Don't quote me on that. So yeah, like really just the issue is this system being crappy. It should be able to do this, but it can't. And we can make something a lot nicer here now, especially because it's not 3D anymore. It makes that a lot easier as well. But so in the layout code, this right here is the test to see whether or not it was able to place the room, I believe. Yeah, because here's it trying, and then this is it failing. And basically, like, you know, normally if you want this code to work well at all, you need it to place things in a way that if it can't place something, it just tries again or doesn't do it, right? And in our case, it's not. So you could just say, like, all right, look, there's no room. It doesn't matter. And that's fine for now. But really, we want to change the way this code works in the future anyway. Yeah, and the other thing, too, is it has to check to make sure that there actually is a room to place it in later. But I don't really like the way this code works, and I never have, because it's maybe a little bit too much, right? Like, it's not explicit enough. It's very, like, vague, like, oh, just here's some rooms that we want you to, like, lay out. And it just doesn't seem, like, it just seems too complicated. So you end up having to, like, buffer everything into basically an IR. Like, there's this intermediate language for what rooms you want, like in this case. You know what I'm saying? And, like, I guess that's okay. I don't know. It just seems kind of... It seems like it's going to be too hard to get the results we want out of it. You know what I mean? And so I feel like something that's just more immediate would be better, where you just, like, generate stuff and it can do little, like, look-aheads if it needs to, but mostly it's just hand-coded how it generates things. It just seems better. Because we have to do all this, like, buffering, right? And it just feels, like, overcomplicated for what it's going to eventually do. We don't have this problem anymore. So, like, the spec, that whole thing, like, that sort of spec thing is what I mean, right? Like, I feel like we can do better than that by just getting rid of those and doing it immediately. So, like, when you start to do the layout, you just actually do the layout in immediate calls. So for example, when you're going to do create orphanage, instead of having to do the spec first, each of these calls actually just generates the actual room, right? And so the downside of doing that is that you need to have some ability to do pre-knowledge of where things might be so that you can make connections between them. But that I don't think that will be that hard in principle, right? Like, we can do little things that look ahead as necessary, but then you don't have this whole nonsense. There's so much, right? Like, going on in here that's all of this stuff could have just been direct. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I just feel like it's kind of stupid is I guess what I'm trying to say. Like I feel like we should be able to make it so that we create what we need to uh at the time. You know what I mean? And I feel like that was just a better approach. This is like it's too advanced. And you could imagine doing it this way. You have a tremendous amount more work and it's not entirely clear why. Like, won't we end up having to make this really like powerful generation system? But why did we do that? Right? Because we know we're only ever going to do this one thing. So it's just going to create a lot of work, but we're not going to get like the benefit out of that work. You know what I'm saying? Because just hand coding the one we actually wanted to generate would actually be less work in total over time, is I guess what I'm saying. So like if you imagine just like sketching this out so that it's doesn't do as stupid as it is, right? It's less dumb. So yeah, and like all this stuff is the same way, right? Like you could still do this, meaning you could still defer placement of NPCs until the end because you literally just build that list, right? And then randomly pick from the list. But otherwise, I think you could just do this more straight ahead. So I think I might just do that, right? So yeah, like suppose. Let me think about this for 1 second. So there is like one kind of weirdness. This has very little to do with the actual So one thing that's kind of a little bit weird is the generating the like sort of forest area is a little bit different than generating dungeon areas in that maybe we just want that area to be like not room based, because that area could be um Yeah, that part's a little harder to think through because if you didn't want it to be room based, you kind of have this weird notion of like where I think maybe so I think maybe this is maybe I shouldn't start on this just and we should just do this is what we do next week entirely. Um so it's been like 2 hours, I think, right? Um I think that's what I want to do. I think that's what I want to do. So I think what we want to do next time is we want to like do the world gen because basically now we need that. Like as we're doing game design stuff, we're gonna need to actually design rooms because they're not gonna like combat's not gonna make any sense outside of the context of like what you're actually fighting in. So I think what we want to do is clean up the world gen next time and massively simplify that down. The room-based stuff, I think, is pretty simple because there's just not a lot to it. The thing that is tricky is the forest because the forest is kind of just continuous, right? And we could make it still be rooms. And maybe we should for simplicity's sake. That's the way like the original Legend of Zelda was, for example, right? But on the other hand, maybe we don't want to do that. Or maybe we want them to still be generated as if they are rooms, sort of, but the rooms are very large. You know what I'm saying? So I think we want to think that through. Like, I think we want to go ahead and think that through. Let's think about that over the course of the week, and we come back and start programming next weekend. Have some kind of an idea in our head about how we want the forest to work and that sort of stuff. So we'll do that. I think that's the plan. I don't suppose John got back yet. Did he? No, he's not streaming or anything. He's probably on a plane. All right. So yeah, I think that's what we want. And that's what we're gonna do next week. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna leave this like this, and we're gonna basically delete 90% of this code in the room gen stuff, and take the stuff that we do have and repurpose it, so that we can get that stuff working more well, right, and have a clearer sort of understanding of how that's going to work. But most of that room gen code's going to go away because most of it's just not necessary. I think it was too complicated, and like we could go down that route, but it's just not. I don't think it's what we want. So, all right, that's it for today. I will see everyone back here next week when we will take a look at improving that room gen stuff to something that I think is usable. Until then, have fun programming, everyone, and I'll see you on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.